It is time. The Philadelphia 76ers need to be focused on tanking, and I didn't mean to turn my camera on, so it has now been disabled for this video. It is officially time for the Sixers need to tank and look towards rebuilding in the future. And I was holding off on this video for a while, but there's reasons now as to why I believe the Sixers have no shot at even making the playoffs. Because for a while, even when the Sixers were bad, it's like they were always in range to at least make the play-in. And at that point, it's like, what happens? But now, not so much. Because the 76ers have just, played like absolute garbage. And have really just, collapsed ever since the start of 2021. At the end of 2025, at the end of 2024, they were sitting at 13-17. Obviously a poor record, but a record that you still hope you can improve on and get to the playoffs. I mean, I get that the 76ers started off, like 2-12. I guess they're off 2-12, and later went on to be 3-14, but they improved. And it looked like they had momentum. Then the team just began to really stink up the bed in January and especially February. I mean, just look at all of these losses. It was an accurate statement at the end of February to say that the Philadelphia Eagles, a football team, won a game more recently than the Philadelphia 76ers. Granted, the Eagles did win a Super Bowl, but that is still an insane stat. That's like the stats at the around Christmas that said that both the Mets and Yankees had won a game more recently than the Giants did. Obviously, like, the Mets and the Yankees both made deep pushes, but still. And with the team only having won, 2 games since, and really just looking to collapse, it is time to look towards the tank. First of all, we need to understand why it's unrealistic for them to make the playoffs. In the NBA, if you're a 7-10 seed, you're in a play-in tournament. And as of now, there are going to be 2 teams that make the playoffs with a losing record because 7-10 are in the play-in tournament, and then from there, it just comes down to who can it comes down to who can in the play-in tournament, which 2 teams can win that tournament. There's a whole set of rules. But you need to be the 10 seed to have a chance. Right now it's the Bulls, who have a pretty awful record of 27-38. Bulls have not been playing well this season. That being said, they're still 4.5 games ahead of the 76ers. As of now, the 8 seed Magic are 30-36, so they're 7 games ahead. So it's quite unrealistic, even with how piss poor the qualifications are. It's still unrealistic to expect the Sixers to be able to realistically be able to make a jump. Because even to get to the 10 seed, you have to win one more game than the Nets, and the Bulls don't exactly, have a super tough schedule. It's not easy, for sure. But, and if this game does wind up determining who gets a 10 seed, then, and it's also the fact that, the Sixers just have no momentum on their side. They were within range of the Bulls, and then they collapsed in the last 10 games. As they, have collapsed all season. And the Sixers, none of these games are really going to be easy wins for the Sixers. They might lose most of these remaining games. They have no momentum on their side. And they're already guaranteed to have a losing record. It's the beginning of March. And they're guaranteed to have a losing record already at 22-42. So there's several reasons as to why the Sixers need to tank. Several reasons as to why they need to tank. And I'm not even going to address the most obvious one of attempting to get a better draft pick yet, because that's complicated, because the NBA does have a draft lottery with the purpose of discouraging tanking. What we need to discuss first is several changes that need to happen in the front office. First of all, it has to be the firing of Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse is the head coach of the Sixers, and in no way should he have a job with the Sixers or with any team in 2025, 2026. Any team that wins a championship has to fire their coach for cause and then gets a second chance on another team. Really, just they don't do well. They don't do well. I know I'm comparing it to the NFL in this case, but it probably holds true across most sports. If you won a championship and then get fired for cause, you must have lost your touch. 2023, 2024, Nick Nurse actually does a pretty good job with the Sixers. And here's what I mean by that. Yes, the Sixers went 47-35 and was stuck in the 7th seed. And yes, they were first-round exits. And, yes, they technically did regress from their previous season. But there's a reason as to why, this wasn't so bad. Because this season, 2022-2023, they were 54-28 third seed, and they were fully healthy. And firing Doc Rivers made sense. And 2023-2024, as it said, Joel Embiid tore his lateral meniscus, and, Embiid came back, but they just couldn't do enough to get a better seed. So, Embiid came back on this game, and they really just did good. They did good while Embiid was on the roster, but they struggled heavily without him. But you'd expect that when the guy who carries your team gets hurt. And Tyrese Maxey also had a few injuries. The Sixers had serious injuries, and they still made the playoffs. Of course, they lost to the Knicks, but even though Nick Nurse didn't coach great, it was still like making the playoffs despite the adversity. It felt sort of like the 2024 Braves in a way. A huge step back after already being out of disappointment, but at least they made the playoffs despite all your injuries. However, now it's a disaster, an unmitigated disaster for the 76ers, as they are just in absolute freefall. And there are some factors as to behind this, like Joel Embiid's persistent knee injuries. Joel Embiid only played 19 games and was sidelined for the rest of the year at the end of February. And who knows what happens. And I'm going to get to Embiid in a second. But you had injuries to Joel Embiid throughout the year. Tyrese Maxey, 4 consecutive games without him. He had a finger issue for several weeks, and the NBA Most Improved Player for 2024, is now struggling heavily. He has injuries. Jared McCain, he also is out since December 16th, and had a serious knee injury that sidelined him for the rest of the year. So there were injuries. But I mean, still, it seems like Nick Nurse isn't even trying at this point. He seems washed. You also got to get rid of Paul George. Paul George has just, absolutely stunk it up this year. He's averaging 16 points a game. And, I mean, a lot of his performances where he's getting a lot of minutes on the court are pathetic. And, Joel Embiid, too. He's got to go at this point. Because he barely plays at this point. He barely plays. He has some good games, but he's inconsistent. And, I mean, just, look at this. I'm pretty sure he missed 47% of his career regular games due to injuries. He's made of glass. You gotta get rid of him. I was saying get rid of him for a while. You gotta get rid of Joel Embiid. You have to. Also, the Sixers GM, Daryl Morey, you gotta get rid of him. He might have been NBA Executive of the Year back in 2018. But, first of all, that was on the Houston Rockets. He made one of the stupidest comments in the NBA. And, Morey is just not making good moves for the Sixers. And you gotta get all of them gone. And for the Tankathon, Sixers right now are tied with the Nets for the number 6 overall pick. And the Raptors lost. They're within a half game of the Raptors. Obviously, whatever pick they get depends on the results of the lottery. And I'm just doing a bunch of simulations. But the Sixers really got to protect the top 6 pick, so that's not sent to OKC. And, they really have to just continue to lose these games to get a better draft pick and get Cooper Flag.